All right, welcome to Creekside Book by Book, and we are starting a new book today, Deuteronomy. And this is one of I really love this book. It is interesting. It is there is a lot of retelling content that we had already gone over, but it is there's a sense of urgency in the book that I think is important even for us today as followers of Jesus, where we are not following all of the ceremonial law throughout the Bible, but we see the importance of the law for the people of Israel. And this book picks up right where Numbers left off. They're on the east side of the Jordan River, and they're about to cross. And so Moses is giving essentially a series of sermons to the people to ensure that this new generation of Israelites hold to the law and will follow God and trust him as they step into the land and begin the conquest. And so Deuteronomy, it comes from the root words deutero, which is two or second, and namas, which is law. So second telling of the law is essentially what it means. The other name in Hebrew is these are the words, because that's how the book starts, with Moses talking to the people. And so the first section that we're going to look at is going to be a good amount of recapping the journey of the people. And we need to keep in mind that this is that 40 years that the Lord told the people they were going to be in the wilderness, that 40 years is over. And so this is a whole new generation. And this generation grew up in the wilderness. They knew about God's sustaining provision throughout their time in the wilderness. They have seen God fight on their side to help them win battles. So they have a confidence in the Lord that maybe the first generation that didn't trust the Lord to go into the promised land, maybe they didn't have that confidence. This generation is far from perfect, and they will have their own challenges as they get into the land. But today we start with Moses knowing that he's not going to go into the land. He will no longer be the leader of the people of Israel, and he's going to have to transition that over to Joshua. And so we're going to talk through that. And so there are large sections that I will be reading today, and we're going to go through chapter 4, verse 40. And a lot of this may feel familiar because we have talked about it over the last couple months as we've been going through the books of the law. So let's start with verse 1. These are the words Moses spoke to all Israel in the wilderness east of the Jordan, that is in the Arabah, opposite Suf, between Paran and Tafel, Laban, Hazeroth, and Dizahab. It takes 11 days to go from Horeb to Kadesh Barnea by Mount Seir road. Now, Horeb is another name for Mount Sinai. So 11 days from Sinai to Kadesh Barnea, which is the southern border of the land of the promised land. In the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month, Moses proclaimed to the Israelites all that the Lord had commanded him concerning them. This was after he had defeated Sihon, king of the Amorites, who reigned in Heshbon, and at Edrei had defeated Og, king of Bashan, who reigned in Ashtaroth. East of the Jordan, in the territory of Moab, Moses began to expound this law, saying, "The Lord our God said to us at Horeb, 'You have stayed long enough at this mountain. Break camp and advance into the hill country of the Amorites. Go to all the neighboring peoples in the Arabah and the mountains, in the western foothills, in the Negev, and along the coast to the land of the Canaanites, and to Lebanon, as far as the great river, the Euphrates. See, I have given you this land. Go in and take possession of the land the Lord swore he would give to your forefathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to their descendants after them.'" So Moses is setting the scene and reminding the people that they started in Horeb, Mount Sinai, and they were there for about a year as they were building the tabernacle and all of the different instructions for the completing the instructions for the elements of the tabernacle. So the Ark of the Covenant, the table of showbread, the lampstand, all those things were being built. And so they were at Sinai for a year. And so then the Lord said, it's time to move forward. So they went north to Kadesh Barnea. And even here, the Lord is giving them a dimensions of the land that he has promised to give to the people of Israel, all the way back in his promise to Abraham. And as we said last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago, the land dimensions that the people were supposed to conquer, they never got there. They never conquered all of that land. And so even here, these dimensions are bigger than what the people of Israel reached, expanded to. I don't know. So they are going up to Kadesh Barnea, and verse 9 says, at that time I said to you, you are too heavy a burden for me to carry alone. This is Moses talking to the people of Israel. The Lord your God has increased your numbers so that today you are as numerous as the stars in the sky. May the Lord, the God of your ancestors, increase you 1,000 times and bless you as he has promised. But how can I bear your problems and your burdens and your disputes all by myself? Choose some wise, understanding, and respected men from each of your tribes, and I will set them over you. You answered me, what you propose to do is good. So I took the leading men of your tribes, wise and respected men, and appointed them to have authority over you as commanders of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens, and as tribal officials. And I charged your judges at that time, hear the disputes between your people and judge fairly, whether the case is between two Israelites or between an Israelite and a foreigner residing among you. Do not show partiality in judging. Hear both small and great alike. Do not be afraid of anyone, for judgment belongs to God. Bring me any case too hard for you, and I will hear it. And at that time, I told you everything you were to do. And so so Moses talking to the people is like, you guys were too much for me at the time, so I delegated some authority to leaders in your communities, and they're called judges. And this continued expansion of leadership for the people of Israel would have been necessary. Even in Exodus 18, Moses' father-in-law comes and says, you can't be the only person hearing all of these disputes. You need to spread the load. And so they did. And so the people agreed to do this. And one of the interesting notes as I was preparing this is the way that Moses talks about these leaders. He calls them judges because they were going to judge and ensure justice was carried out. But they are divided up in a system of divisions that are like a military order. When he says that they are judges over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tribal leaders, that's a military thinking. And if we fast forward to the time of the judges, it's interesting that the judges, when we read through that, we'll see that they are noted that they are coming from specific tribes, that they are part and they're leading their tribes. And so it makes sense then why some of these judges became the leaders of their communities. It's something that Moses set in place all the way back here, but then also why those judges, so many of those judges were leading military units because they were organized that way already. And so we'll get into judges in a while, and it'll be super fun. But the other important thing here is, like, there's no lawyers in Old Testament law. The people, the families, they were representing themselves, and they were coming to the judges to seek restitution, reparation, to make things right, to seek justice. And the judges are instructed to not show any partiality, to hear big cases, small cases, to treat people the same. And in particular, if a whether the case is between two Israelites or between an Israelite and a foreigner residing among you. The law was the law, and it applied to the Israelites, but also to all of the foreigners, all of the people living there in the land. They were supposed to be impartial to the foreigner among them, which is an important piece as we think about the history of the people of Israel. Like, they didn't always do a great job in how they treated the foreigner among them. And that's one of the things that the prophets will actually talk to them and bring correction about over time, is that they were mistreating the poor, the orphan, the widow, and the foreigner among you. And so all of these different categories, are supposed to be treated impartially in the law. So they set up the governance structure, the judges to keep the whole nation moving forward, and they're heading north. It's an 11-day walk. Verse 19, then as the Lord God commanded us, we set out from Horeb and went toward the hill country of the Amorites through all the vast and dreadful wilderness that you have seen. And so we reached Kadesh Barnea. Then I said to you, you have reached the hill country of the Amorites, which the Lord our God is giving us. See, the Lord your God has given you the land. Go up and take possession of it, as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, told you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Then all of you came to me and said, let us send men ahead to spy out the land for us and bring back a report about the route we are to take and the towns we will come to. The idea seemed good to me, so I selected 12 of you, one man from each tribe, and they left and went up into the hill country and came to the valley of Eshcol and explored it, taking with them some of the fruit of the land. They brought it down to us and reported, it is a good land that the Lord our God is giving us. And so they came to the land, and Moses said, go take it. The Lord's giving it to us. Let's trust the Lord. And their first response is, let's send some scouts, some spies to go ahead. And so that we know the story. They select 12. They go out into the land and they look around, and they see the land is good. It is a good land, and like the valley of Eshcol in particular, it is known for its grapes, and so they bring back grapes. And one of the things that has stuck with me, and I don't remember if I talked about this when we looked at this passage initially, but my children's Bible that I had, my very first Bible that my parents bought me, had pictures in it. And one of the pictures that stands out so vividly is the people of the spies coming back to the people with like a stick between two men, and on it was just this giant bunch of grapes. That's the picture that I see right now. Like look at all of this wonderful produce, and it is a good report about the land. However, chapter 1, verse 26, but you were unwilling to go up. You rebelled against the command of the Lord your God. You grumbled in your tents and said, the Lord hates us. So he brought us out of Egypt to deliver us into the hands of the Amorites to destroy us. Where can we go? Our brothers have made our hearts melt in fear. They say, the people are stronger and taller than we are. The cities are large, with walls up to the sky. We even saw the Anakites there. Then I said to you, don't be terrified. Do not be afraid of them. The Lord, your God, who is going before you, will fight for you, as he did for you in Egypt, before your very eyes. And in the wilderness, there you saw how the Lord, your God, carried you as a father carries his son. All the way you went until you reached this place. In spite of this, you did not trust the Lord, your God, who went ahead of you on your journey in fire by night and in a cloud by day, to search out places for you to camp and to show you the way you should go. When the Lord heard what you said, he was angry and solemnly swore, no one from this evil generation shall see the good land I swore to give your ancestors, except Caleb, son of Jephunneh. He will see it, and I will give him and his descendants the land he set his feet on, because he followed the Lord wholeheartedly. Because of you, the Lord became angry with me also and said, you shall not enter it either, but your assistant Joshua, son of Nun, will enter it. Encourage him because he will lead Israel to inherit it. And the little ones that you said would be taken captive, your children who do not yet know good from bad, they will enter the land. I will give it to them, and they will take possession of it. But as for you, turn around and set out toward the desert along the route to the Red Sea. Then you replied, we have sinned against the Lord. We will go up and fight as the Lord our God commanded us. So every one of you put on his weapons, thinking it easy to go up into the hill country. But the Lord said to me, tell them, do not go up and fight, because I will not be with you. You will be defeated by your enemies. So I told you, but you would not listen. You rebelled against the Lord's command, and in your arrogance you marched up into the hill country. The Amorites who lived in those hills came out against you. They chased you like a swarm of bees and beat you down from Seir all the way to Hormah. You came back and wept before the Lord, but he paid no attention to your weeping and turned a deaf ear to you. And so you stayed in Kadesh many days, all the time you spent there. So the people see how good the land is, but they also hear the report from the scouts, the spies, that there are giants there. The Anakites in particular, the Amorites are taller than us. Their cities are huge, their walls are huge, but the Anakites, who are the Anakites? And one of the questions about this group of people, they are considered to be giants. All the way back in Genesis 6, we read about the sons of God taking the daughters of men. And that leads to this idea, these people, these beings called the Nephilim. And the Nephilim are, in some traditions, are some kind of supernaturally enhanced person. In Genesis 6, it says these are the heroes, the warriors of old. These could be the race of giants, and the Nephilim continued on down to the Anakites as a descendant of the Nephilim. And so they're huge people, and so they're terrifying. And so we read about them in Numbers 13 as well. And so they hear that the Nephilim, the Anakites are there, and they just were like, we can't do this. God hates us. He wants us to die out here. He wants our children to die out here. And so then the Lord says, well, if you're not going to trust me, then you're not going to the land at all. This generation, no. You're afraid for your children that they're going to die if you take the land, but the children are the one who are actually going to inherit the land. This generation will not, with two exceptions, Caleb and Joshua. Caleb, because he was wholeheartedly trusting the Lord. The Lord is with us. We can do this. And even in this passage, Moses says, you, the people of Israel, did not trust the Lord even after you have seen him do all these things. He has provided for you. He has guided you with a pillar of fire and a pillar of cloud, and you still did not trust him. This new generation will not get to go into the land. But they rejected that message as well. And they said, well, then let's go. But the warning is that Moses gives is, you will go, but you will not win, because God is not with you. And that's exactly what happens. So they are told to go back toward the Red Sea, which is just discouraging. They just came from Egypt. They crossed the Red Sea and they were heading to the land of the promise. And now the Lord is saying, head back to the land of your bondage. And a whole generation is going to die out in the wilderness. Now, one of the important things here, like, there is a concept of holy war in the Old Testament as they go in to take the land, right? This is a God-ordained holy war. And so you would think, well, if God wants them to take the land, then why would he be mad here? God's desire is not just rampant violence for violence sake. And here, the people had the opportunity to trust the Lord and walk in step with him, but they rejected that. And when they recognized that they would not receive the blessings of God, then they tried to take it. And that then set them outside of God's holy war ordinance. So they were trying to do it on their own. And so not every war is a holy war. Not every conflict is something that is God ordained. And even in the Bible, when we see people fighting, that's not necessarily, we can't say every single time outside of the conquest for the people of Israel that those wars were something that God desired for the people. And so that's something to keep in mind. Sometimes we read the Bible, we read the violence in these texts, and we're like, oh, so much violence. But God does have a limit to the violence in the holy wars. Like that, it needs to be ordained by him, leading and guiding his people for it to be considered God's commands. And so Moses also says something in here is like, and I wasn't able to go into the land either because of your disobedience. But that's not the whole story, if we remember. Moses is summing up for the people of Israel right now. Like he's leaving out a key detail, that it was his anger and disobedience that kept him from entering in to the land of the promise when he struck the rock. And so that's something to keep in mind here as well. And so while they're in the wilderness, Miriam dies, Aaron dies, and Moses is told that he's not going to get into the land. So let's jump to chapter 2, and I'm going to read through 23. So it's a longer section here. Then we turned back and set out toward the wilderness along the route to the Red Sea, as the Lord had directed me. For a long time we made our way around the hill country of Seir. Then the Lord said to me, you have made your way around this hill country long enough. Now turn north. Give your people these orders. You are about to pass through the territory of your relatives, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir. So this is Edom. They will be afraid of you, but be very careful. Do not provoke them to war, for I will not give you any of their land, not even enough to put your foot on. I have given Esau the hill country of Seir and his own. You are to pay them in silver for the food you eat and the water you drink. The Lord your God has blessed you in the work of your hands. He has watched over your journey through this vast wilderness, these 40 years. The Lord your God has been with you, and you have not lacked anything. So we went on past our relatives and the descendants of Esau who live in Seir. We turned from the Arabah road, which came up from Elat to Etzion Geber, and traveled along the desert road of Moab. Then the Lord said to me, do not harass the Moabites or provoke them to war, for I will not give you any part of their land I have given Ar to the descendants of Lot as a possession. The Emites who used to live there, a people strong and numerous and as tall as the Anakites, like the Anakites, they too were considered Rephaites, but the Moabites called them Emites. Horites used to live in Seir, but the descendants of Esau drove them out. They destroyed the Horites from before them and settled in their place, just as Israel did in the land the Lord had gave them as their possession. And the Lord said, now get up and cross the Zered Valley. So he crossed the valley. 38 years passed from the time we left Kadesh Barnea until we crossed the Zered Valley. By then, the entire generation of fighting men had perished from the camp, as the Lord had sworn to them. Then the Lord's hand was against them until he had completely eliminated them from the camp. Now, when the last of these fighting men among the people had died, the Lord said to me, today you are to pass by the region of Moab at Ar. When you come to the Ammonites, do not harass them or provoke them to war, for I will not give you possession of any land belonging to the Ammonites. I have given it as a possession to the descendants of Lot. That too was considered a land of the Rephaites who used to live there, but the Ammonites called them Zamzamites. They were a people strong and numerous and as tall as the Anakites. The Lord destroyed them from before the Ammonites, who drove them out and settled in their place. The Lord had done the same for the descendants of Esau who lived in Seir. When he destroyed the Horites from before them, they drove them out and have lived in their place to this day. And as for the Avites who lived in the villages as far as Gaza, and Caphtorites coming out from Caphtor, destroyed them and settled in their place. All right. So there's a couple interesting pieces here as we read through this book. And sometimes there are some sections that seem like they are editorial comments that were written after Moses' speech. And so like chapters are verses 10 through 12 and 20 through 23 are both like asides. And Deuteronomy is one of those books that has some questions about how much of this was written by Moses, and how much was editorial content. Like part of that is because the end of the book, Moses talks about dying. So Moses didn't write that. And so there is obviously some things that are written by editors, and these sections are some of those things that sound like a scribe came in to try to help make sense of some of the background information, which is fine. Like we don't have to be afraid or concerned about the veracity of scripture when we come to these kinds of things, because the inspiration of the Bible is not just that God like did an info dump on people's brains and they wrote it all out, like just right. But there is a guidance of the Spirit of God bringing the Word of God to its final form here. And so these editors, we can trust that these kind of editorial comments were in line with the Spirit's work of inspiration. And so even here, as they're talking about this, we're remembering that there were Anakites in the Kadesh Barnea area, and there seemed to be some history of Anakites in the Moabites' land and in the land of Edom, where the descendants of Esau drove them out. Like the Anakites were spread all throughout here, and so the Anakites and their descendants, wanting to note that there are some influences here that were even driven out before the Lord's people of Israel came. Like Esau's descendants did this as well. They were doing some of the Lord's work and purifying the land from the Anakites. And so they were in the land, they were in the wilderness 38 years, and the Lord said, it's been long enough, go north. And as you're going north, do not harass the people of Edom, Esau's descendants, because they are they're your cousins, they're your forefather Jacob's brothers, descendants. Like, so don't harass them. In fact, buy stuff from them, like replace anything you used. And when we read in Numbers, like the people of Edom did not want them to come through their land, and so they actually went the long way around. And they, even when we get to Moab, they're like, no, you cannot cross through our land. So they went the long way around. And so they're respecting these people. Moab's descendants were were descendants from Lot, who is Abraham's nephew. And so these are all family relations that the Lord is saying, I loved your ancestors and their family, so I want you to respect their descendants. So so they went the long way around to come into the land and to not try to create any conflict. And it's when they get to the area of the Ammonites where they start to see a little bit more of the conflict, but also with the Midianites as they are coming into the land. Sorry, I jumped ahead. I want to make sure I don't miss something here. But this 38 years was intended to purify the camp of the people who were disobedient to the Lord and not trusting him. And so they are getting close to where in the travel log to where they currently are. So verse 24, the Lord speaking through Moses, set out now and cross the Arnon Gorge. See, I have given into your hand Sihon the Amorite, king of Heshbon and his country. Begin to take possession of it and engage him in battle. This very day I will begin to put the terror and fear of you on all the nations under heaven. They will hear reports of you and will tremble and be in anguish because of you. From the desert of Kedemoth, I sent messengers to Sihon, king of Heshbon, offering peace and saying, let us pass through your country. We will stay on the main road. We will not turn aside to the right or the left, sell us food to eat and water to drink for their price in silver. Only let us pass through on foot as the descendants of Esau who live in Seir and the Moabites who live in Ar did for us until we cross the Jordan into the land the Lord our God is giving us. But Sihon, king of Heshbon, refused to let us pass through, for the Lord your God had made his spirit stubborn and his heart obstinate in order to give him into your hands as he has now done. Does that sound familiar? The Lord has made his heart, has hardened his heart, made his spirit stubborn. That is what happened with Pharaoh. And so the Lord is beginning to create situations where people will come against the people of Israel only to be defeated, and in doing so will increase the reputation of the Lord as the one who is fighting their battles with them. And so here that's happening. And so the Lord said, see, I have begun to deliver Sihon and his country over to you. Now begin to conquer and possess his land. When Sihon and all his army came out to meet us in battle at Jahaz, the Lord our God delivered him over to us, and we struck him down together with his sons and his whole army. At that time, we took his town and completely destroyed them. Men, women, and children, we left no survivors. But the livestock and the plunder from the towns we had captured, we carried off for ourselves. From Aroer on the rim of the Arnon Gorge, and from the town in the gorge, even as far as Gilead. Not one town was too strong for us. The Lord our God gave us all of them, but in accordance with the command, the Lord our God, you did not encroach on any of the land of the Ammonites, neither the land along the course of the Jabbok, nor around the towns in the hills. So the Lord is putting a divine terror on Sihon and his kingdom as they come against them and they defeat them. And so the people of God are on the move, essentially, is what Moses is getting to, and they're winning, and God is with them and blessing them. And here it's like he's trying to help them remember that there is no city that is too strong for them, and that nobody could stop them. And that's important as they're about to go into the land. Moses isn't going to be there. They need to remember as they go that God is fighting their battles. And so that's a lot of what this section is all about. And in here, we also see that they're not here to just take all of the people. They're destroying the population, because the Lord knows that these populations, if they don't destroy them, will be a thorn in their side with idolatry and pagan practices. And so this is called the ban. Like these are things that are not appropriate, not allowed for the people of Israel, and so they are part of the ban, the harem, and so this is part of the holy war as well. As like there's going to be things that the people are not allowed to keep, not allowed to take for themselves, because it is set apart for destruction. So chapter 3, just clipping right along. Next, we turned and went up along the road toward Bashan, and Og, king of Bashan, and his whole army marched out to meet us in battle at Edrei. The Lord said to me, do not be afraid of him, for I have delivered him into your hands, along with his whole army and his land. Do to him what you did to Sihon, king of the Amorites, who reigned in Heshbon. So the Lord our God also gave into our hands Og, king of Bashan, and his army. We struck them down, leaving no survivors. At that time, we took all his cities. There was not one of the 60 cities that we did not take from them. The whole region of Argob, Og's kingdom in Bashan, all these cities were fortified with high walls and with gates and bars, and there were also a great many unwalled villages. We completely destroyed them, as we had done with Sihon, king of Heshbon, destroying every city, men, women, and children, but all the livestock and the plunder from their cities we carried off for ourselves. So at that time, we took from these two kings of the Amorites, the territory east of the Jordan, from the Arnon Gorge as far as Mount Hermon. Hermon is called Sirion by the Sidonians, and the Amorites call it Senir. We took all the towns on the plateau and all Gilead and all Bashan, as far as Salakah and Edrei, towns of Og's kingdom in Bashan. Og, king of Bashan, was the last of the Rephaites, which are again part of the Anakite descendants. His bed was decorated with iron and was more than 9 cubits long and 4 cubits wide. It was still in Rabbah. It is still in Rabbah of the Ammonites. And so here we have some more conflict, another kingdom, Og's kingdom, that's coming against them. But they win, and they take all the cities and the villages, and they eliminate the population, but they're able to continue to build their flocks and herds, which is good. Like, this is what part of what God wants them to do. And the Lord is again on their side. And one of the more interesting notes here is Og's iron bed. And this bed is 9 cubits long, which is about 13 feet. Based on what some of the commentaries said, it's not small. And so the way that some people think about this bed is, it could be like more like a couch that they reclined in when hosting parties and that kind of stuff. Or it could be a bed, and Og needed a giant bed because Og was a giant. He's part of the Rephaim, the descendants of Anakites, the descendants of the Nephilim. And so like these are like things that the writer is even saying, like, you can go and still see this bed, because you wouldn't believe it if you couldn't see it. And so so he's the last of the remnant of the giants and in this area. And so when we see talk of giants in the Bible, we need to keep in mind that these giants, for the Hebrew writer, were somehow connected back to the Nephilim. And this is a spiritual issue, not just a size issue. And so this is a holy war that they are fighting against the descendants of dark spirits. If the Nephilim are demons that sleep with women, like, and have the children were Nephilim, like, this is a spiritual battle of these for the people. And so it's, when we see a giant mentioned in the Bible, pay attention to that, and go look and see, like, what is going on here, and what is the spiritual battle that is being waged, not just the physical world, but the spiritual realm as well. Verse 3:12. Of the land that we took over at that time, I gave the Reubenites and the Gadites the territory north of Aurora of the Arnon Gorge, including the half hill country of Gilead, another together with its towns. The rest of Gilead also all of Bashan, the kingdom of Og, I gave to the half tribe of Manasseh. The whole region of Argob and Bashan used to be known as the land of the Rephaites. Jair, the son of Manasseh, took the whole region of Argob as far as the border of the Geshurites, the Maacathites. It was named after him, so that to this day Bashan is called Havot Jair. And I gave Gilead to Machir, but to the Reubenites and the Gadites I gave the territory extending from Gilead down to the Arnon Gorge, in the middle of the gorge being the border, and out of the Jabbok River, which is the border of the Ammonites. In its western border was the Jordan in the Arabah, from Kinneret to the sea of the Arabah, that is the Dead Sea. Below the slopes of Pisgah, I commanded you at that time. The Lord your God has given you this land to take possession of it, but all your able-bodied men armed for battle must cross over ahead of the other Israelites. However, your wives, your children, and your livestock, I know you have much livestock, may stay in the towns I have given you until the Lord gives rest to your fellow Israelites as he has to you. And they too have taken over the land that the Lord your God has given them across the Jordan. After that, each of you may go back to the possession I have given you. So this is just that the 2.5 tribes that are staying on the east side of the Jordan. They came to Moses. Remember, they said, we would like to stay here. We've got all these flocks, we've got all these herds. We'd love to, this land is good and there's space for us. There's cities that are already built that we can move into. And so they did, with the stipulation that they had to come and fight with the other tribes to take the whole land that God had promised them, because the other tribes also fought with them to take this land, to defeat these kingdoms. And so so they agreed to do this. And then in chapter 21, at that time I commanded Joshua, you have seen with your own eyes all that the Lord your God has done to these 2 kings. The Lord will do the same to all the kingdoms over there where you are going in the promised land. Do not be afraid of them. The Lord your God himself will fight for you. At that time, I pleaded with the Lord, sovereign Lord, you have begun to show to your servant your greatness and your strong hand. For what God is there in heaven or on earth who can do the deeds and mighty works you do? Let me go over and see the good land beyond the Jordan, that fine hill country and Lebanon. But because of you, the Lord was angry with me and would not listen. That is enough, the Lord said. Do not speak to me any more about this matter. Go up to the top of Pisgah and look west and north and south and east. Look at the land with your own eyes, since you are not going to cross the Jordan, but commission Joshua and encourage and strengthen him, for he will lead the people across and will cause them to inherit the land that you will see. So he stayed in the valley near Bet Peor. And so here Moses reminds the people that he's not going to go over, but he encourages Joshua, like, look at these 2 victories that we just had, and God has so much more for the people as they go into the land. So be bold and courageous. And those words will come back when we get to Joshua, because Joshua, before he begins the conquest, has an encounter with the angel of the Lord, and the angel of the Lord says, be strong and courageous. Everywhere your foot touches this land I'm giving to you. And so these words are going to echo into the life of Joshua in the future as well. But Moses is like, please, can I go? Would you please relent? Would you please change your mind? And the Lord says no, but he does let him get up to the land. And this Mount Pisgah, you could see a lot of the land. You can't see all the way to the Mediterranean, but you could see a lot of the land, and this was going to have to be enough for Moses. And so he's telling the people early on in this speech, like, I'm not going with you. And we're not going to read about Moses's death until chapter 34. And so we know that there's a lot that Moses still has to say. And so chapter 4, verse 1. Now, Israel, hear the decrees and laws I'm about to teach you. Follow them so that you may live and may go in and take possession of the land the Lord your God of your ancestors is giving you. Do not add to what I command you, and do not subtract from it, but keep the commands of the Lord your God that I give you. You saw with your own eyes what the Lord did at Baal Peor. The Lord your God destroyed from among you everyone who followed Baal Peor, but all of you who held fast to the Lord your God are still alive today. That is when the king of the Midianites, and I'm blanking on his name, Balaam, told the king to send in the women to sleep with the men. That's Baal Peor. And so he's reminding them, look what disobedience brought this destruction. So don't disobey the Lord. See, I have taught you decrees and laws as the Lord my God commanded me, so that you may follow them in the land you are entering to take possession of it. Observe them carefully, for this will show your wisdom and understanding to the nations, who will hear about all these decrees and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. What other nation is so great as to have their gods near them the way the Lord our God is near us whenever we pray to him? And what other nation is so great as to have such righteous decrees and laws as this body of laws I am setting before you today? And so the goal for the law, as we see here, is that they would be an example of the path of life that God is giving to Israel, so that the nations would be attracted to be like Israel. They are supposed to be a nation of priests, mediators between God and humanity, to show God's path for life, and that they would be amazed at the wisdom and the understanding of the people. There's so much optimism right here for the people of Israel. Verse 9, only be careful and watch yourselves closely so that you do not forget the things your eyes have seen or let them fade from your heart. As long as you live, teach them to your children and to their children after them. Remember the day you stood before the Lord your God at Horeb, when he said to me, assemble the people before me to hear my words, so that they may learn and to revere me as long as they live in the land, and may teach them to their children. You came near and stood at the foot of the mountain while it blazed with fire to the very heavens, and black clouds and deep darkness. Then the Lord spoke to you out of the fire. You heard the sound of words, but saw no form. There was only a voice. He declared to you his covenant, the 10 commandments, which he commanded you to follow, and then wrote them on 2 stone tablets. And the Lord directed me at that time to teach you the decrees and laws you are to follow in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. And so the goal here is that the people would hold tightly to God's commands, that they would be demonstrating the goodness of God. The nations would be impressed by the nearness of God as they trust him and see his blessing again and again. But they need to remember what God has done. Otherwise, they may forget and drift away. And as we have seen so far, the people are prone to wander. And that will be the case again for the people of Israel as we look to the rest of their journey. But the fear of the Lord, remembering his power and his might, is going to be a constant thing throughout Deuteronomy. Remember the Lord, remember the Lord, remember what he's done. And don't veer off into idolatry, which is the next section here. Verse 15, you saw no form of any kind that day that the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the fire. Therefore, watch yourselves very carefully so that you do not become corrupt and make for yourselves an idol, an image of any shape, whether formed like a man or a woman, or like any animal on earth, or any bird that flies in the air, or like any creature that moves along the ground, or any fish in the waters below. And when you look up to the sky and see the sun, the moon, the stars, and all the heavenly array, do not be enticed into bowing down to them and worshiping things the Lord your God has apportioned to all the nations under heaven. But as for you, the Lord took you and brought you out of the iron smelting furnace, out of Egypt, to be the people of his inheritance, as you now are. And so here he's saying, remember the mountain, remember at Horeb, Sinai, you did not see any form, so do not make an idol, and do not limit God to think that he's like the sun or the stars or the moon. Plenty of different neighboring nations worship the sun and the moon and the stars, but Moses is trying to help the people see that God is bigger than all of those. He is greater than all of those, so do not worship them. The Lord was angry with me because of you, and he solemnly swore that I would not cross the Jordan and enter the good land. This is because he struck the rock, is giving you as your inheritance. I will die in this land. I will not cross the Jordan, but you are about to cross and take possession of the good land. Be careful not to forget the covenant of the Lord your God that he made with you. Do not make for yourselves an idol in the form of anything the Lord your God has forbidden, for the Lord your God is a consuming fire and a jealous God. After you have had children and grandchildren and have lived in the land a long time, if you then become corrupt and make any kind of idol, doing evil in the eyes of the Lord your God and arousing his anger, I call the heavens and earth as witnesses against you this day, that you will quickly perish from the land that you are crossing the Jordan to possess. You will not live there long, but will certainly be destroyed. The Lord will scatter you among the people, and only a few of you will survive among the nations to which the Lord will drive you. There you will worship man-made gods of wood and stone, which cannot see or hear or eat or smell. But if from there you seek the Lord your God, you will find him if you seek him with all your heart and with all your soul. When you are in distress and all these things have happened to you, then in the latter days, you will return to the Lord your God and obey him. For the Lord your God is a merciful God, and he will not abandon or destroy you or forget the covenant with your ancestors, which he confirmed to them by oath. And here Moses' words are essentially, trust the Lord, don't fall into idolatry. And if you do, I'm calling all of creation as a witness against you. Creation itself is watching how you will act. Creation is not God, but it is God's handiwork. And it is one more sign of God's power. And they have seen the Lord break the rules of creation in their journey through the land to get to here. And so Moses is essentially saying, like, why would you doubt? Why would you doubt? But he also has a vision of the future here that you will doubt, and you'll be scattered off into the lands of the nations. But even then, if you seek the Lord, you will be saved. And so it's just a very interesting part of the story here that Moses is painting a picture for us of the future exile. That will happen, but it won't be the end of the story, that God will still come to rescue his people because they are his and he wants the best for them. They are in covenant together. So verse 32. Ask now about the former days, long before your time, from the day God created human beings on the earth. Ask from one end to the heavens to the other, has anything so great as this ever happened, or has anything like it ever been heard of? Has any other people heard the voice of God speaking out of fire as you have and lived? Has any God ever tried to take for himself one nation out of another by testings, by signs and wonders, by war, by a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, or by great and awesome deeds like all the things the Lord your God did for you in Egypt before your very eyes? You were shown these things so that you might know that the Lord is God. Beside him there is no other. From heaven he made you hear his voice to discipline you. On earth he showed you his great fire, and you heard his words from out of the fire. Because he loved your ancestors and chose their descendants after them, he brought you out of Egypt by his presence and his strength, to drive out before you the nations greater and stronger than you, and to bring you into their land, to give it to you for your inheritance as it is today. Acknowledge and take to heart this day that the Lord is God in heaven above and on earth below. There is no other. Keep his decrees and commands, which I am giving you today, so that it may go well with you and your children after you, and that you may live long in the land the Lord your God gives you for all time. And so the Lord, Moses is reminding them all that God has done. Remember these experiences and recognize how unique and special you are, that no other nation has had this experience with any God being able to draw them out from a nation, to drive out the nations before them, to get them to the land that God has promised them. So it's a beautiful, beautiful picture that Moses is painting for the people. Like, you are so loved, you are so treasured. Remember this, and trust the Lord. And that's where we're going to stop. As we get into the next section, there will be a little bit more of the instruction piece. Like, what are you supposed to teach your kids? How are you supposed to do this from generation to generation? But yeah, the last words of Moses and Deuteronomy are very interesting. And I love this book. So any questions or thoughts on all that we went over today as we started Deuteronomy?
I think it's interesting that that he keeps blaming Israel for being the reason that he's, because of you, I'm not going into the land. I mean, he was angry because of them. They did stoke his anger, but it was still his choice to have that reaction. So
yeah, it was his disobedience that keeps him from the land. But I do think it is not outside of the rest, like the people of Israel, in the narrative so far have been like, Moses, this is your fault that we are going through this, or this is God's fault that we're going through this. There's so much blame shifting of personal responsibility throughout the Old Testament so far, all the way back to Adam and Eve. It was the woman you gave me. And the woman saying, it was the serpent who can talk. Like shifting the blame over and over. Even Cain, when he killed his brother, like, am I my brother's keeper? Like, this isn't my responsibility. So yeah, it's one of the things I appreciate about Deuteronomy is Moses. Moses is not shown to be better than the people of Israel, even in his blame shifting. So, I mean, you can't preach on that, but it is an interesting dynamic here. He's not above them. Any other thoughts or questions?
I'm kind of sad for Moses.
Yeah. Tell me more, Chris. Why are you sad for Moses?
I mean, he just wanted to go. He wanted to see the land. He wanted to be with his people. And he gave a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that. I get that. And sorry, I'm looking to share something with you all. I've been uploading these videos to YouTube, and the graphics that we've been using as like a front graphic is something that Jeremy Schmidt has been putting together. And these are woodcuts. So share screen. But the image for Deuteronomy, I thought was really, really good. So let me share this with you. So this is Moses looking into the land. And so, Chris, there is a sense of yearning in Moses throughout the book. Like, I want to go so bad. I want to be there. And I know I'm not going to.
Mhm.
So, Israel, do the right thing. Like, all these people before you who failed, you have an opportunity now to do the right thing. But these this wood cutting, there's an artist that Jeremy is he's using their work here, but they've done like the whole Bible with these kinds of woodcuts. And so so I get the heartbreak for Moses, but it is encouraging to us that the Lord was not surprised that Moses wasn't going to make it. And he's like, Joshua can do this. Like, there's always in the work of God, there's always another leader who's got next. Like, he's not limited to Moses, which I find very encouraging. Moses brought Joshua along, and now it's Joshua's time. So, but yeah. Let me stop sharing that. All right. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, why did, during that whole time in the wilderness, why did he allow all the fighting men to perish? He was going to need them. I mean, later on, it says, all able-bodied men armed for battle. Yeah, like, why did you allow, why did they have to die off? And then you'd have to create a whole new breed of people to battle.
So, I mean, it took 40 years. So it wasn't like they just lost all of their institutional knowledge for any kind of warfare that they had at that point. So they passed it on to the next generation. But that generation, all the able-bodied men that he's talking about are essentially the adults. All the adults willingly disobeyed the Lord. And so the adults were not allowed to go into the land. And so, yeah, it doesn't make sense, like in the way our minds think. But the Lord is looking for a people who will trust him implicitly, who will obey him in this next chapter for the nation of Israel. And he couldn't have these doubters, or these people who thought we can do this in our own strength. The Lord's like, no, that's not going to work, because what the Lord wants for the people of Israel as they go into the land Like he says, I'm going to put the fear of God in these people because they're going to hear about what God is doing for you. And so if the people aren't going to trust that the Lord is doing this for them, then this wouldn't work the way God is desiring it to work. So
That's kind of evident at the beginning of that chapter when they didn't want to go, and then then after the little pep talk, oh, we want to go, and then God's like, I'm not going to be there with you. Tell them no.
yeah. I mean, if you've had children, there's times where you say, let's do this, and like, I don't want to, and then you're like, okay, then we're not going to, and then they're like, okay, but we want to. It's like, no, we had that shot. So yeah.
It's like dinner time half the time in my household. We're gonna have this. I don't want to.
And then I'm so hungry. We had a plan for dinner and you rejected it.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of well, I guess you're having popcorn for dinner. Go microwave up some popcorn. Maybe that's just my growing up years.
Also,
Yeah.
another question too, the whole, the concept they kept building or making idols out of wood and stone that didn't talk. And that reminds me of like Easter Island, or like things you see in South America, the big monoliths and all that kind of thing. Is that exactly what they did in the Middle East?
That's a good question. There's a lot of questions around Easter Island, like what are those images? Are they idols or are they monuments? Like we don't know 100%. But the idols of the ancient Near East were like statues, essentially. So, one of the things to keep in mind is that they didn't think that those idols were the god, but they believed that like Baal inhabited that idol. Like he wasn't limited to one idol for all of the Baal worshipers, but he like filled it somehow. And so when we read the prophets, we see that they come back to this motif again and again, like don't build these idols of wood and stone because they don't do anything. They're not alive.
Yeah, they can't see, they can't hear, they can't eat.
Right. And so, like they act like they can, but they cannot. And so their idolatry is a small, weak picture of what God truly is. God doesn't need you to make him. God doesn't need you to feed him. God doesn't need you to carry him around. So why would you settle for something so weak? Is essentially what the biblical approach to idolatry is. Like, why would you want something so small? Why would you put your trust in something so powerless?
Yeah.
But it's a lot easier for people to put their trust in something they can see. And so that's part of the reason why idolatry is so attractive even now. So
that kind of baffles me. Why would you carry something around and talk to them? You can just drop to your knees and pray to the God above. I just don't get that at all.
Yeah, but I mean, why would people put their confidence in their 5-year plan for success? Like that becomes the whole goal and their whole life. It becomes a form of idolatry, and it's also weak and powerless. But idolatry has a weird way of working its way into the human heart and shaping our actions in ways that are not good for us. And that's the case of the people throughout the Bible. Anytime they pursue idols, it is not good for them. And so, yeah.
The other question I had too, when they worship the sun, the moon, the stars, is that considered like astrology, like the Chaldeans did?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, I mean, astrology is looking to the stars for like wisdom and direction. Yeah. Whereas like just sun worship is just saying like the sun is so powerful because it dictates the rest of our year, and so it must be a powerful entity that deserves honor. Like that's enough to be idolatrous. But it isn't necessarily saying like, not every time were people worshiping the sun, the moon, and the stars, were they looking to the sun, the moon, and the stars for wisdom and direction for their day-to-day life. It was more just, look at how powerful these things are. They're bigger, they're impressive. So, well, the stars, they didn't have any idea the concept of the gas giants and all that stuff. They didn't know how big the stars really were. They were eternal is more like a better way to frame that. So
It makes you wonder, had they named them even then? Like we have Mars, Venus, Pluto, Neptune. Have they named them then? I mean, really had
there
them
were
named
names. Yeah.
new time.
I believe in Job, there are some references to named constellations, but just naming a constellation doesn't mean you worship that constellation. Sometimes it's just like, oh, look, like all kinds of different cultures have named constellations different things. And so like in Japan, they have they have 3 bears, right? But we would use those as, we would call them something else. And so it's your culture shapes what you see in the patterns of the stars. So
Yeah.
was somebody saying something? Did I cut them off? No. Okay.
I just marvel at how many times he has to tell them. I would have just looked at them all. All right, the 2 million of you, just focus on what I've been telling you. Don't look at this group. Don't look at this group. Don't look into their idols, because if you do, you're kind of messed over here for the rest of the journey. You probably won't go on the rest of your journey. Make it a little hardcore.
Yeah. Well, Moses will make it hardcore. We'll get there. We'll get there, Carrie. Don't worry. Towards the end of the book, Moses is going to get hardcore. So there will be curses and all kinds of fun stuff. So
I guess I'm a black and white kind of person. It's like, it's this or that. Pick and choose. Do you choose life? Do you choose death? Which?
yeah. Carrie,
Unfortunately,
we'll
you
get
can't
there.
help. You can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped. So, I mean,
That's right.
you can say over and over, do this, do this, do this, but unless they want to, you're
Wasting your time.
Well, yeah. So, so we will definitely get to the curses and blessing. So choose life is the message of throughout Deuteronomy. Choose life. Choose life. And they have a hard time with that. So, all right. Any other questions or thoughts? No. All right. Well, y'all have a good night, and I'll see you Sunday. And I don't know if you can hear the students above my office here, but they're done with youth group. So that means my kids are probably done too. So I'll see you all Sunday or next week on Zoom, and y'all have a good night.